I have to admit that my last email did make me feel less alone. So I'm writing another one. We're still stuck here, my friend and I. My friend is the adventurous one. Sometimes when I'm with her, I feel like I'm falling, that I've stepped off a ledge and I am no longer in control of what is happening, and everything that occurs are things that happen to me rather than things I choose. I wouldn't call her reckless. I am not afraid when I'm around her. Rather, to her, consequences are small things that can be kicked aside. I'm the kind of person that refuses to jaywalk. Consequences loom around me in every direction, ready to devour me whole. Perhaps that's why she's my friend. I can hide in her shadow from my fears. She returned from her excursion with food, and contrary to my earlier concern, she did not leave the building. There was a convenience store downstairs, she explained, and she took what she wanted. She even left money on the counter. There was someone else in the store, she explained, when I raised an eyebrow in surprise. Another one of those shadow people, and while it did not respond to her, she felt that perhaps it would be best to abide by the rules of normal society while we were here, just in case. You see? Adventurous, but not reckless. We spent the rest of the evening trying to decide on what we would do next. We had to venture outside at some point, she reasoned. The buildings were closer together, and the monster made a lot of noise, so we could duck inside as soon as we had it and wait for it to leave. There was a chance we wouldn't encounter it at all, she insisted. We'd come all the way to the hotel from the train station without incident, after all. That alleviated my concern somewhat. Still, I had difficulty sleeping. I woke, startled awake by my own fears, throughout the night. At one point, I dared to look outside the window, and the city was black, like a curtain had been drawn across the building. The only light was far in the distance, an orange haze from the horizon, from the direction of the lake. It really was fire, I thought. There was fire on the lake. Otherwise, the night was uneventful, much to my surprise. I wouldn't call it restful, though. At least there was coffee at our free brunch. The dining room was in the middle of the downstairs lobby, underneath the whalebone ceiling, and a shadow person showed us to our table in silence. I brought my backpack with me because I'm paranoid about leaving my laptop behind. We weren't the only ones dining. A handful of other tables had shadow people as well, and they sat there, repeating the same motions over and over, like a skipping record. One raised a coffee mug halfway to their lips before dropping it back onto the table. Another kept scooting their chair back to stand, then stopped and sat back down. And our waiter kept reappearing at our table, a coffee pot in hand to refill our cups. When we got back from the buffet, we found that it had tried to refill our mugs enough times that the coffee had overflowed onto the table and was now pooling on the floor. We sat down at the adjacent table instead and let the waiter continue to pour more and more coffee, the steaming puddle steadily spreading towards where we sat with our food. At least the breakfast buffet was impressive. Smoked salmon, cheeses, pastries, and the usual assortment of eggs, bacon, and sausages. "We should go to the Art Institute," my friend said. "Can you imagine what it looks like?" I told her that I'd rather not. I didn't disagree that there was a strange beauty in this version of Chicago, but it felt sharp, like a knife. Watchful. A sense of unease had draped itself across my shoulders since the moment we'd arrived, and it wasn't just because our surroundings were so strange. I felt it in my blood and bones. Something was horribly wrong with this city. "The only thing we've seen that's dangerous is a monster, and we can avoid that," she insisted. "It won't take long. We'll take a quick look around and then leave. We can catch the red line from there and get out of the city that way." Still, I couldn't bring myself to agree. She pressed, asking what I was afraid of. The monster? Of course there was that, but we'd heard it approaching well before it arrived. We could do this. It'd be okay. And I only grew more and more agitated, unnerved by our experiences last night, and by my lack of sleep. Finally, I slammed my palms down onto the table. "I don't want to die here!" I cried, louder than perhaps I should have. I paused and looked around nervously. The shadow person at the nearby table dropped its coffee mug once more. It cracked in two when it hit the table. and all the rest turned to look at us. My friend stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping uncomfortably loud on the floor. My heart hammered in my chest. "We should go," my friend said, grabbing her purse. I stood as well and grabbed my backpack. The shadow people stood in unison. We made for the exit as quickly as we could. Behind us, the shadow people followed. Their steps were uneven, as they moved as a fluid black mass of empty faces, and where one met another, their shoulders merged, their outlines indistinct from the other. I set an aggressive pace, and while we were not running, we were moving quickly across the lobby. They followed, matching our speed, and when we sped up, so did they. When we slowed down, they did so as well. My friend was the one to try that. I just wanted to run. There weren't many places to go. Worse, they were fanning out, blocking other avenues of exit. The front doors were the only options left to us. So, despite my terror, we went out into the city again. The valet was conspicuously absent from the front of the building, and I stepped gingerly over the pavement from which the monster had risen. Behind us, the shadow people poured out from the rotating doors. There seemed to be more of them now, which I nervously pointed out to my friend. "Just keep walking," she replied calmly. "They're only following us. It'll be okay." I wished I shared her confidence. She turned left out of the building, and I followed her. It wasn't until I saw a familiar stretch of greenery ahead of us that I realised where she was taking us. The park. "I said I didn't want to go to the Art Institute," I hissed. "We need to lose them if we want to get our stuff out of the hotel room," she said. "Besides, look how far we've come and no monster. It'll be fine." I admit that I could feel the more acute terror bleeding away as we walked. It was replaced with a general sense of unease, which was only reasonable considering our circumstances. My friend outlined her plan as we walked. We'd go into the Art Institute, and hopefully they'd stop following us at that point. Money seemed to have meaning in this world after all, and she had a membership that would get us in without having to buy tickets. I said that this sounded like an excuse to go see how fucked up the art inside was, and she admitted that yes, that was a secondary motivation. If they started to follow us up the stairs, we'd just go down the other side and continue on to the train station without our luggage. Sadly, my friend's plan worked. The shadow people following us peeled off as soon as we were on the steps leading to the Art Institute. The exterior of the building looked much like the rest of the city, charred, walls built of packed bone. The lions that stand to either side of the building were melted, their top halves peeled away in liquid curves, thin streams of cold metal dripping down the sides of their pedestals. Like butter in the microwave, in the instant before it entirely collapses. There were no shadow people inside, not even to take our ticket at the turnstile. My friend suggested that we could go to the cafe, get some tea, and wait a bit before returning to the hotel. The interior of the Art Institute was initially unremarkable. Gentle light from the ceilings fell on the worn marble floors. I allowed myself to think that perhaps my friend was right, that we could just get some tea at the cafe and rest a few minutes before returning to the hotel. This lasted until the first gallery. I hesitated at the entrance, as the light ended just beyond the open doorways. I could see the other end of the floor that lay between, but the rest of the room was plunged into shadow. "If we hear anything other than ourselves," my friend said evenly, "we turn and leave, okay?" "Okay." We stepped into the gallery. The only sound were our footsteps and the beating of my heart in my ears. The darkness pressed in around us, and I strained to see in the shadows, terrified of any sign of movement from within. There was nothing. Then a shape loomed out of the darkness in front of me. I stifled a scream and staggered backwards, bumping into my friend. I froze. We stood there for some brief seconds, and then the shape of a display stand resolved itself in the darkness. I let out a shaky breath. Of course. There were sculptures in this hall. I peered closer, trying to discern what the sculpture was of. A squat mound, rounded at the top, the details indiscernible in the darkness. My friend got out her cell phone and turned the flashlight on. She cupped one hand around the lens so that it wouldn't spill too far. A pile of bones sat inside the display. They were neatly stacked to form a square pyramid, overlapping one another and locking in place. At the pinnacle rested a human skull. The bones were blackened, but not from soot like the ones outside. They shone under the light of the phone, like oil. "It's not the weirdest thing we've seen so far," my friend whispered. We continued on. There were windows in the next gallery, and while the lights were still out, these at least provided some natural light. We went down the stairs to the lower level, where the cafeteria was. There was also a small members' lounge, and while the bar was unattended, there was still a fully stocked, self-serve tea and coffee station. The lounge was normal. Even the magazines were what I would expect to see in there. "I want a whiskey in my tea," my friend said. "Go get a bottle, please." I hesitated a little. As I said, I'm not a rule breaker. But the situation prevailed on me. We were in a nightmare Chicago. We deserved a little whiskey, even if it was technically stolen. I pulled a chair over to the bar and climbed upon it to hop the ledge. A body was curled up on the floor of the bar. A human one. A man, probably in his late 40s. The skin was textured like tissue paper, and there was no stink of rot. Like he was all dried out. I whispered to my friend what I'd found. She came and peered over and swore softly. Then I noticed something strange. The floor was scuffed in some sort of pattern. I climbed over the bar and dropped down next to the corpse. Under the light of my phone's flashlight, the scuff marks on the floor resolved themselves as text, carved into the vinyl. The same words, over and over. "The city will burn." "We should go," I said to my friend. "Hand me the whiskey first." We had a way out, she reasoned, as I reluctantly complied, hoping it would get her moving. We'd go back to the hotel, get our belongings, and go to the train station. This poor individual no doubt had had some sort of nervous break and died hiding here instead of trying to escape. There was no reason to panic yet. Certainly, I had reason to be nervous, but we just had to stay calm and rational to get through this. She poured a strong helping of whiskey into my tea and handed it to me after I'd clambered up over the bar. I admit, I did feel a little better after the tea. I sat on the opposite side of the room from the bar, however. On our way out, my friend paused to shine her light on the paintings in the gallery. They were blank, empty, blank canvases. "That's disappointing," she muttered. I got out my own phone and turned on the flashlight. The paintings on the other side of the hole were the same. All black, perfectly matte, like they absorbed the light. I began to feel uneasy and asked my friend in a low voice to please don't touch them. She replied that she had no intention to. There was the sound of a droplet of water hitting the marble floor. A subtle sound, but in the silence, it was perfectly clear. I paused, listening intently, trying to determine where it was coming from. A steady drip. Then, another joined it, and another. I shone the light down at the floor, sweeping it around to see if the light reflected off a wet spot, and instead I found more of that darkness. I shone the light on the base of the paintings. They were dripping. The black was seeping off the canvas and over the frame and running like water onto the floor. As I watched, the flow quickened, and then it was a stream, multiple streams, pouring out of the paintings, and the water was snaking its way across the floor to where we stood. "Time to go!" I gasped. My friend didn't need any urging. We broke into a run, our lights bouncing wildly across the floor. I jumped over one dark patch. It looked like there were pillars, the size of fingers, bulging up out of it in response to my presence passing over it. The stairs out of the gallery, I risked a backward glance, and saw the water reach the top of the stairs and then cascade down to the next. The landing. To either side of us was more stairs, leading down into the lower levels, where there were a handful more exhibits. I shone my flashlight down the stairs as we ran past them. The lower exhibits were flooded with black water, and on the surface, under the reflection of my light, shone a multitude of eyes, like pearls. They rose, the surface tension stretching to form the contours of a massive skull. and a shriek, like rending metal, echoed through the corridors. Then we were past the stairs, running down the last grand stairway, towards the lobby, and behind us came a snapping like branches in the winter as the monster drug its bulk out of the water, its footsteps echoing through the corridors like the building's heartbeat. The Art Institute was its lair, and we blundered right into it. I was screaming at my friend to run. Faster! We had to get out of here! The building shook as something immense hit the walls, but we were at the doorways, stumbling at the impact, and then we were tumbling down the concrete steps and spilling out into the street. My friend grabbed my shoulder, her nails digging into my skin, and pointed at a Starbucks on the opposite corner. I hit the door first, wrenching it open and holding it for her. Then I let it fall shut and followed her to the back of the room, ducking behind the counter to hide. I peeked up over the edge to stare back at the Art Institute. The creature was oozing out of the front doors like mould. It bulged, the black mass of its body joined together, and then an ashen grey arm shot out and grabbed at the concrete stairs. It heaved, pulling itself forwards, and then part of the bubbling mass pouring from the doors elongated, forming a neck, and the end split open into long, dripping teeth. Those glittering eyes bobbed to the surface and raked up and down the street, searching for its quarry. Then the rest of its legs emerged, and it finally slipped free of the Art Institute, one last door slowly swinging shut as its tail exited. It took off down the street, seemingly picking a direction at random. 3 quick, fluid leaps, and it was out of sight. The screeching of metal faded, and we were left only with our frantic, ragged breathing and the beating of our hearts. We're not going back to the hotel. We're going to wait here until either the creature returns to its lair or we haven't heard from it for a bit, and then we're going to the train station. My friend needs to rest anyways. She's badly winded from sprinting like that. I'm a bit better off, as I'm an avid runner already, so I'm keeping watch while I type all this up. I can see the lake from here. I keep thinking about that dead man's final warning. The city will burn. In the distance, I can see the fires burning on the surface of the black water. They're much, much closer than they were last night when I looked out of the hotel room window. It started to rain fine soot over the city, just a light mist, like a faint dusting of snow in early winter. I think I understand why all the bones of the buildings are blackened. The city is going to burn. Soon. We've got to get out of here. Sightseeing is over. I intend for my next update to be from the right Chicago, cozy in our hotel room, where there are no monsters outside.